Hi, I'm going to cover three topics today, hopefully pretty quickly. Parallelism, passive voice, and precision. These are some things that will help you to make your design proposals more clear and concise. First of all, parallelism. What is it? Well, it means balanced or equal. When we're talking about writing, making things parallel usually has to do with things in a list, or whether it's a bulleted list or a list as part of a sentence. And the things that should be made parallel are that each of the listed elements should have be of the same grammatical type. In other words, we've got a list of nouns or a list of adjectives or prepositional phrases or so forth, and that the function of the element should be parallel. So sometimes that means that the things in our list are actually functionally different, and what we want to do is separate them and make more than one list in that case. So let's look at a couple of examples. Here's a simple sentence with a couple of gerund verbs, brainstorming and drafting, and then a couple of things that don't match, the use of a computer and a proofreader. This one's pretty simple. We could just change everything to the same verb form there. Okay, writing a good essay involves doing this, brainstorming, drafting, using a computer, and proofreading. Does anybody see another sort of little hiccup in this sentence though? It reminds me of that, what was a Sesame Street song, one of these things is not like the others. We've got this phrase in there, using a computer, that doesn't quite match the other verbs we've got going. So I would just eliminate that one. Writing a good essay involves brainstorming, drafting, and proofreading. If we want to talk about why and how using a computer is important, it's probably a separate topic. I hope that makes sense. Here's another example. This is very wordy. We've got a list here again, but we've got a couple of things going on. We've got different verbs. So we've got one person both introducing things and requesting things. And so my advice would be to actually make two parallel lists. The mayor introduced a new initiative and a new policy to his councilors. So we've got, a new initiative and a new policy. Those are both grammatically parallel. And then we've used the second verb. He requested they give him careful consideration and detailed feedback. So consideration and feedback then are parallel again. I wasn't really happy about that second parallelism though, and so it sort of caused me to start thinking about what's really going on in that sentence, and I wondered if it might not be better to reduce the strategy of listing all together and come up with something that's a little bit more like this third example. Okay, let's try one more. This one, as you can see, is just a mess. A few suggestions are more screening, having a blah, 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 blah. We don't have any context. We've got a big list here, but it even takes us a little while to figure out that we've got a list because the sentence is so jumbled up. So what I did was give us a little more context at the beginning. A few air travel security suggestions are, and then since our list is full of phrases rather than specific or single words rather, introduce it with a colon, okay, not a semicolon. I don't have time in this presentation to talk about the difference, but if you're not sure of the difference, please look that up. A colon, and then we've got three grammatically parallel things in our list there. That's one possible revision. It's not the only one. Okay, passive voice. This is the one that I keep telling you I'm going to talk about, right? What is passive voice? Well, a passive construction occurs when you make the object of an action into the subject of a sentence. And the reason that it gets a bad rap is sentences like this. Why was the road crossed by the chicken? Which just doesn't even really make very much sense to us. Basically, what you want to look for is any form of the verb to be, so is, am, was, were, etc., plus a past participle. And if you've got those things occurring, you've probably got the passive voice here. So in other words, we've got was, and then the past participle crossed. we've got the passive voice. The object is has been moved into the subject of the sentence. So it's bad, right? Well, there are reasons for using it, and the three that you'll often hear are that, first of all, it sounds objective. Second of all, it eliminates having to use I or we, which we think is unprofessional, to include these personal pronouns, and that it emphasizes results. The passive alone doesn't sound any more or less objective than the active voice, and if it's less clear, then objectivity doesn't really matter. Likewise, I think it's kind of arbitrary to just sort of say, using a personal pronoun is unprofessional. There are reasons to use it and reasons not to use it. However, it is true that the passive voice emphasizes results, and so let's look at how that works. Here's a really simple sentence. I repaired the computer. I is the subject, and I'm the actor. I'm doing repairing. And what am I repairing? An object, the computer. Okay, so if we turn that into a passive construction and make the object, the computer, the subject of the sentence, it becomes the computer was repaired by me. This is where the passive voice gets a bad rap, because if I'm doing the repairing, then that first active sentence is much clearer. However, if it's not at all important that I did the repairing of the computer, and what we want to emphasize is the result, that the computer got repaired, then the passive voice is completely understandable and clear. We just eliminate the actor at the end of the sentence altogether, and the computer was repaired. It's very clear, we understand the meaning, and it's really not important who it was that repaired the computer. So often, as you can maybe already start to assume, scientific writing, reports, and so forth emphasize results. And the actor or the person who is doing the experiment or whatever is going on maybe is not nearly as important as the results and the object of those results. So these are some occasions where you might want to use a passive construction. There's another example of when the actor is not important. So the solution was heated to 100 degrees is passive voice. We've got the verb form of to be, was, and then the past participle heated. It doesn't matter if I was the one who heated it, or you heated it, or the professor heated it, or it doesn't matter. We just take the actor out of the sentence. Sometimes the actor is unknown. So there's an example of that. This might occur if you're talking about the literature, for example. Sometimes it's perfectly legitimate to remove the actor just because you don't know who they are. And then sometimes you just don't want to name the actor. This gets into a little bit of an ethical dilemma sometimes, maybe, that we don't necessarily need to go into because it's probably not germane to your design reports. But just be aware that when an actor gets removed from a sentence, there might be a reason to do so. Okay, so here's kind of an example of that. This isn't really an ethical dilemma, but there's a difference between saying the project was managed successfully. We don't know who managed the project. Maybe we don't want people to know who managed the project. Maybe we're delivering bad news, for example. We want to change that to the project was managed rather unsuccessfully, but we don't really want to assign blame to specific people, so we've got this passive construction. But if we're writing and we want to say, hey, you know what, we did a really good job here, put the action, or the actor rather, back into the sentence. We managed the project successfully, and so you can hopefully see there's a difference in meaning between those two sentences, whether or not the actor we shows up. Okay, there's more I could say about the passive voice. I like this website, ProTrain Co. This particular explanation of the passive voice is written specifically for engineers and engineering discourse. So if you want more explanation or to take a look at more examples, please visit that website. Precision. Typically, precision refers to taking out unnecessary words. And by unnecessary, we mean empty. So words that don't contribute to the meaning that we're trying to get across. So reducing wordiness does not just mean making things shorter. Okay, we don't want to reduce detail that's necessary to communicate our message, but we do want to try to get rid of empty words. And it's kind of ironic here that I've, made a slide full of words about reducing wordiness. But let's just look at a few examples of things that you can look for. Wordiness is really tricky because there are things you can look for, but again, like so many things, there aren't specific rules to follow, although I will give you kind of a method of trying to identify some at the end here. Okay, these are just typical things that show up that are kind of wordy. Redundant words or doubling. So if you look down that list, to reconsider again is sort of redundant. We can just use reconsider because reconsidering implies that you're considering again. Inadvertent error. Well, errors are, not always, they're typically inadvertent. It's kind of redundant. So you can just say error. Qualifying words. These kinds of qualifying words, they're not bad, they're not ungrammatical, but they might not convey a lot of meaning. And sometimes when you've added a not very specific qualifier like extremely, maybe there is some detail that needs to be included and extremely isn't covering it. So what I would suggest with these qualifying words is that if you see them, that's a place you want to think about, what is it really that I'm trying to communicate here? Maybe there's some detail missing that you're trying to sort of cover up by just using a qualifying word like extremely. Formulaic phrases. Unfortunately, these are things that we think that they are a part of professional or academic style, but really they're typically very empty words. So there's one list, but you can go on the web and find gobs and gobs and gobs of these phrases that, typically 4 or 5 words that have one word that means the exact same thing. Catch-all phrases. There are a couple of examples there. Just to draw your attention to the first one, a surprising aspect of most labor negotiations is their friendly quality. I think this is a good example of also burying the key or the meat or the subject or the topic of this sentence in the middle. A surprising aspect is kind of this empty phrase at the beginning. We're not quite sure the subject yet. It's sort of describing the subject. So already the reader gets a little bit bogged down in the words, where what we're really saying here is that most labor negotiations are friendly. Now, it's important in this context, apparently, that they are surprisingly friendly, and so we can add that in as an adverb later. Most labor negotiations are surprisingly friendly, but that sort of revision is much clearer and reduces a lot of words that get in the way of our meaning. You can watch out for to be. So if you're using to be a lot, chances are those are places where those are often words that can be eliminated. And also, if you catch yourself using the words who, which, and that, obviously that doesn't mean that all the time you're going to be reducing words, but there are some examples there to show that these are often places where you can take out entire clauses. For example, the novel, which is entitled Ulysses, takes place blah, 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 blah. The novel Ulysses takes place. It means the exact same thing. We've just taken out a few words and helped the reader get to the topic of the sentence earlier, and therefore to the sort of important part of the sentence earlier as well. Okay, there are some more examples there that you can look at. Here's that method I was promising. It's kind of lengthy. There are 7 steps. Some things to do are circle the prepositions, draw a box around the is verbs, ask where's the action, change the action into a simple verb. Hopefully by now all of this stuff sounds pretty familiar because we've gone over it in class and in this lecture as to what to look for. I don't necessarily believe that you're going to go through and do all of this for every sentence and every paragraph in your paper, although I think at some point it would be kind of an interesting exercise for you to go through a paragraph and try some of these things. The other thing that you can do is use the grammar and style features in your word processor. So I definitely wouldn't rely on your grammar checker, but it might help you identify or come to notice some of these things we've been talking about. So I'm happy to answer questions. sarah.bell@utah.edu, and I look forward to working with you on your design report drafts. Thanks.